The habit started 40 years ago and never left me. Every morning at 5:15, before the alarm could make a sound, I was already awake. I lay still for a moment in the gray dark of my bedroom, listening to the house settle around me. Old houses do that, especially in October. They creak and shift like they're stretching after a long night, and if you've lived in one long enough, you stop hearing it as noise and start hearing it as conversation. I swung my legs off the bed, found my slippers with my feet without looking, and walked to the window. The backyard was still dark, but I could make out the shape of my workshop at the far end of the property. A low square building with two skylights and a side door I'd hung myself, back when my knees still cooperated without complaint. I'd built it the summer after I sold the company. That was 7 years ago now. 41 years in general, contracting will leave marks on a man. Not just the bad knee and the two fingers on my left hand that no longer fully straighten. It leaves a way of seeing things. I walk into any room and I can feel whether the floor joists are right. I look at a wall and I know what's behind it. I can stand in the middle of an empty lot and picture, without effort, what belongs there. It's not a skill anymore at this point. It's just the way my eyes work. After Carol passed, I didn't know what to do with a day that had no job sites and no foreman meetings and no bids to review. My son Derek suggested I take up golf. Crystal, his wife, suggested I look into one of those 55 and older communities down in Florida. She mentioned it the way people mention things they've already decided on, cheerfully, like the conversation was just a formality. I stayed in Millhaven. I stayed in my house, the one I'd built with my own hands on Carver Road 26 years ago, and I found my way back to wood the way you find your way back to an old friend. Not furniture, exactly, at first. Just repair work. A neighbor's dining table with a broken leg, a rocking chair someone left at the curb. Then I started building. Clean joints, hand-fitted dovetails, no power tools unless absolutely necessary. I sold a few pieces to a furniture gallery in town. Then more. Then a collector in Nashville paid me more for a single writing desk than I'd ever paid myself in a single week running the company. But that wasn't the point. The point was the silence of the workshop at 6 in the morning, the smell of walnut shavings, the way a piece of wood will tell you what it wants to become if you're patient enough to listen. My son Derek and his family lived on Birchwood, about 12 minutes from Carver Road. They'd been in that house for 4 years. It was mine, technically. I'd bought it outright when Derek and Crystal got married, as a wedding gift and a practical solution. They paid me rent, not much, just enough to cover the property taxes and leave a little extra. Crystal had once called it generous. Lately, she didn't mention it much. I got along with Derek the way you get along with weather. You don't fight it, you dress for it. You wait for it to change. He was a good man in the ways that mattered. He worked hard. He showed up. He loved his kids, Lily, who was 14, and Noah, who had just turned 11. But there had always been something between us, a frequency we couldn't both tune to at the same time. He thought I was too quiet. I thought he was too fast. We'd been negotiating that difference his entire life. Crystal was a different matter. She was sharp, ambitious, the kind of person who kept score even in conversations where no one else knew there was a game. She managed a regional chain of home goods stores and was good at it. I'd never denied that. She had a talent for systems, for managing people, for knowing what a room full of strangers needed to hear. I respected competence in any form. What I didn't respect was the way she wielded it, like a rank insignia she pinned on every time I was in the room. She'd started small. A comment here about how I should really sell the Carver Road house. Something that size is too much for one person. A suggestion there about maybe I should let a property management company handle Birchwood instead of doing the maintenance myself. Then it became jokes. Not mean ones, exactly, just persistent. At Christmas dinner the year before, she'd explained to her mother what I did in the workshop, and she'd framed it the way you'd explain a child's hobby. He tinkers with furniture, she'd said. He enjoys it. I let it go, the way I'd let most things go over the years. Carol used to say I had the patience of a man who'd never met his limit. She was right, mostly. But every man has a limit. I just hadn't found mine yet. Derek called on a Tuesday afternoon while I was fitting the legs on a cherry wood console table. "Dad," he said, "Crystal's getting a big promotion. Regional VP. We're having a dinner Saturday to celebrate. Her boss is coming, and some people from corporate." "That's good news," I said. "She's worked hard for it." "She has." I could hear him smiling. He was proud of her, genuinely, and I didn't begrudge him that. "We're doing it right. Nice restaurant, private room. We'd like you there." There was a pause, and I knew something was coming. Crystal just wants it to be, a polished evening. Her boss is kind of old school, important. "I know how to behave at a dinner table, Derek." "I know, Dad. I just mean, maybe don't get into the whole workshop thing. It can go on a while." I put down my marking gauge. "I'll be there," I said. I hung up and stood there a moment looking at the cherry legs lined up on my workbench. Outside the skylight, a cloud passed over and the light shifted. I thought about Carol, about how she would have known exactly what to say right then. She always did. Saturday came with cold, clear weather and a sky the color of an old denim jacket. I wore the sport coat I'd bought for Lily's school concert last spring, a dark navy and pressed slacks. I looked in the mirror and saw what I always saw. A man who was 67 years old, with white hair he kept short, and hands that looked like they belonged to someone who worked with them, which they did. The restaurant was a place called Westfield Grill, the kind of place with cloth napkins and a wine list printed on heavy paper. The private room had a long oval table and paintings on the walls that were trying very hard to look expensive. I arrived at exactly 7, which meant I was the first one there. A waiter brought me water, and I sat and waited. They came in a group, Derek and Crystal first, then her boss and his wife, then 2 other couples from the company. Crystal was wearing a red dress, and the kind of confidence that comes from knowing exactly what you look like in it. She made introductions with the ease of someone who'd been doing it professionally for years. "And this is Walter," she said when she got to me, Derek's father. Her boss was a man named Philip Carver, late 50s, silver-haired, the kind of man who fills a room by knowing he can. He shook my hand firmly. "What do you do, Walter?" "I'm retired," I said. "I build furniture now. Custom pieces, mostly." His eyebrows rose with genuine interest. "Furniture? What kind?" "Mostly hardwood. Cherry, walnut, some white oak. Hand joinery, traditional methods." "Fascinating," Philip said. "My father was a cabinet maker. I grew up watching him work." He leaned forward slightly. "Do you sell?" Before I could answer, Crystal stepped in smoothly. "He's very modest," she said, smiling at Philip. "Walter was a contractor for years. Now he putters around in his workshop." She laughed lightly. "It keeps him busy." Philip looked at her for just a moment, then back at me. I smiled and let it pass. We sat down. The table had a rhythm to it, the way these things do. Crystal held the center. She was good at it, I'll say that again. She talked about the company's expansion plans, the new supply chain strategies she'd introduced. Philip asked sharp questions and she answered them without hesitation. Derek watched her the way a man watches someone he's proud of. I ate my salmon and listened, and offered comments when they were welcome. Somewhere around the main course, the woman to my left asked what kind of furniture I made. "Right now I'm finishing a console table in cherry," I said. "Before that, a writing desk that went to a collector in Nashville." "How wonderful," she said. "Do you have a website?" Crystal overheard that. She turned from her conversation with Philip and smiled across the table. "Oh, Diane, don't get him started." She said it warmly, like she was protecting the table from a long evening, and several people laughed. "Walter can talk about wood grains for 45 minutes. I've been there." A soft laugh, nothing pointed. Philip smiled politely. I took a sip of my water. Dinner wound on. Dessert came. A creme brulee for most people, coffee for the rest. Crystal's colleague offered a toast to her promotion and everyone raised their glasses. I raised mine. Then Philip said something casual, just making conversation, about whether the Birchwood house had good bones. He'd heard the neighborhood was going through some changes. Crystal glanced at me and then said pleasantly, "Oh, that's Walter's house. Technically, he lets us live there." "That's generous," Philip said, nodding at me. "It is," Crystal agreed. "It's an older property. Could really use updating. We've been wanting to renovate for 2 years, but Walter has to approve everything because she paused, choosing the word with a small smile, because he's particular. Particular is another word for careful, I said quietly. "Of course," Crystal said, and then to Philip with a light wave of her hand. "Honestly, I keep telling Derek his father needs a hobby that takes him out of the house. The workshop is fine, but a man can only sand so many tables." Before she laughed before the neighbors start wondering. Another laugh from the table. Then, more quietly but not quietly enough, to the woman beside her. "Retired contractors, you know. They spend 30 years telling everyone else what to do, and then suddenly there's no one left to tell." The table had moved on to something else, but I had heard it. Philip had heard it. His wife had heard it. I sat with it for a moment. The table noise continued around me. Derek was talking to someone on his right. Crystal had turned back to Philip. I looked at my dessert fork, which I'd set down without using. I looked at my hands, the crooked fingers on my left hand, the calluses that didn't go away even after 7 years. I thought about the Birchwood house, which I'd bought when Derek was 28 years old and just married. I thought about the property taxes I paid every year, the new roof I'd put on 3 years ago, the furnace I'd replaced last winter without saying a word about it. I thought about the way Crystal had said lets us live there, like it was an inconvenience I'd been indulged about. I folded my napkin and set it beside my plate. "Crystal," I said. The table quieted around us, the way tables do when a tone changes. "I want to make sure I understand," I said, and my voice was calm, the way it is when I'm measuring twice before I cut. "The house on Birchwood, the one I bought, the one where I replaced the roof and the furnace and repainted the exterior 2 summers ago." She looked at me with an expression that was still almost amused. "Walter, I just want to be clear," I said, "because you described me as particular about it, and I want Philip to understand the full picture." Philip was watching me with interest. His wife was very still. "You're welcome to renovate the house," I said to Crystal. "You can knock out any wall you want, as soon as you own it." I reached into my jacket pocket, where I'd put my keys out of habit that morning, and I found the spare key to the Birchwood house on the ring, where it always lived. I worked it off the ring carefully, set it on the tablecloth in front of me, and slid it gently across to the center of the table. "Consider this my notice. I'll need you to arrange to move out within 60 days, or we can discuss a purchase price." Crystal stared at the key. Derek turned and looked at me. The table was very quiet. "Dad," Derek said. "I'll cover dessert," I said to the table, and I nodded to Philip and his wife. "It was a pleasure meeting you both." I stood up, set $200 on the table beside my plate, put on my coat, and walked out. The parking lot was cold and still. I found my truck, got in, and sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel. My chest felt tight, but my mind was clear. The way it gets when I've just figured out the solution to a structural problem I've been working around for too long. I drove home. The workshop light was on. I'd left it on by accident that morning, and the square of yellow light in the backyard made the house feel less empty. I went inside, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Derek called at 11. "Dad, what were you thinking?" "I was thinking clearly," I said. "Possibly for the first time in 4 years. You humiliated Crystal in front of her boss. Do you have any idea what that could do to her?" "She humiliated me first," I said, "in front of the same people, twice. And you sat there." Silence. "Dad, she didn't mean—" "Derek," I kept my voice even. "I have watched you not hear things for a long time. That's your right. But I'm done pretending I didn't hear them either. She called me a hobby. She implied I was an old man who needed to be managed. She did it in front of her boss, and she did it with a smile. What word would you use for that?" Another silence. Longer this time. "I'll talk to her," he said finally, and his voice had changed, some of the heat gone out of it. "But Dad, 60 days isn't enough time. We have the kids in school. Crystal just started this new role. 90 days, I said. That's my final offer, or a fair purchase price. I'll have it appraised. You would really sell your own son's home? It's my home, I said quietly. You know that. You've always known that. He hung up. I poured the rest of my coffee down the drain and went to bed. I slept well, which surprised me. I thought I might lie awake turning the evening over, finding the moments where I could have done something differently. But sleep came fast and held steady until 5:15, when I opened my eyes to a dark and quiet house and felt underneath everything, something that took a moment to name. I felt like myself. The next week passed slowly. I worked in the shop, long mornings fitting the console table's top panel, afternoons on a new project, a rocking chair in white oak I'd been planning for months. I didn't hear from Derek. I called twice and left messages. He didn't return them. I heard from Crystal once, on day 4. Her voice on my voicemail was clipped and controlled. She said they would be consulting an attorney about the lease. I listened to the message twice, then called my own attorney and let him know. What I didn't expect was the knock on my workshop door that Thursday afternoon. I was in the middle of fitting a mortise joint when I heard it. 2 sharp knocks and then a pause. I set down my chisel and opened the door. Noah was standing on my back step with his backpack on and his jacket half zipped and his dark eyes serious in the way they got when he was trying to look older than 11. "Hi, Grandpa." I looked past him. "How did you get here?" "Bus," he said. And then I walked the last part. "Does your mom know where you are?" He looked at his shoes briefly, then back at me. "She thinks I'm at Tyler's." I held the door open and he came in. He looked around the workshop the way he always did, slowly, taking inventory. He'd been in here 100 times over the years, but he always looked at it like it was new. He stopped in front of the console table on the horses. "Is this cherry?" "It is," I said. "How do you know that?" "The color," he said. "And the grain is tighter than walnut." We looked at wood grains in science for a project about trees. I studied my grandson. He was built like Derek, square shoulders already coming in, thick at the wrists. But his stillness was something else. He got that from somewhere else. "Noah, you have to call your parents." "I know." He looked at me. "I just wanted to see you first. It's been loud at home." I pulled up the stool I kept by the workbench and he sat down. I went back to my mortise, giving him a moment. "Grandpa," he said after a while, "are we going to have to move?" I kept working the wood. "Your parents are looking for a place. Mom says you were mean." He said it matter-of-factly, not as an accusation. But Dad said he stopped. "What did your dad say?" Noah picked at a loose thread on his backpack strap. "He said you were right, but he said it quiet, like he didn't want her to hear." I set down the chisel and looked at my grandson. "Can I try?" he asked, nodding at the chisel. "Wash your hands first. Sink's on the wall." He washed up and came back, and I showed him how to hold it, how to read the grain, how the pressure had to be steady and controlled and never forced. He was quiet the whole time, I explained. Then he tried it, and on the second pass he felt the difference. "There," I said. "That's what you're looking for." He worked a few more strokes and then sat back. "Dad never showed me this stuff. Your dad was never interested." "But I am," Noah said plainly. I looked at him for a long moment. He looked back at me with his serious dark eyes and his jacket half-zipped, and I thought about the way things repeat themselves in a family, the skipped generation, the interest that lands 2 steps over from where it started. "When you get moved and settled," I said, "you can come here on Saturdays. I'll teach you properly." "Really?" The seriousness cracked just slightly, and under it was a 10-year-old boy. "Really? Now call your mother." The conversation with Derek that night was different from the ones before. He was quiet in a way that had texture to it, not the cold quiet of anger, but something thinner, more tired. "He got there on his own," Derek said. "I didn't know. He's a good kid," I said. A long pause. Then Derek said, "Crystal's not sleeping well." I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? I thought about it honestly. Yes, I said. I don't want any of you to suffer. I just couldn't keep going the way things were. She called you particular, Derek said, and a handyman, and some other things that didn't need to be said in front of her colleagues. He breathed out. I heard her. I always hear her, Dad. He stopped. I got good at not reacting. I thought it was the right thing. For who? Another long pause. I don't know anymore. That was the most honest thing my son had said to me in years, and I didn't push past it. I let it sit. Give me 3 months, he said quietly. Not for her, for the kids' school year, and I want to talk to you, properly, not on the phone. Come by the workshop Sunday, I said. I'll make coffee. He came Sunday, alone. He parked his car in the driveway and walked around the side of the house to the workshop the way he used to do as a boy, without knocking. He stood in the doorway and looked around the same way Noah had, and I wondered if I'd ever noticed before how similar they moved. Smells the same, Derek said. From when I was a kid. You used to have a workshop at the old house. Same smell, different wood. He sat on the stool Noah had used. I handed him a coffee and leaned against the workbench. We were quiet for a while, and it wasn't uncomfortable the way our silences used to be. It was more like two people sitting at opposite ends of the same problem, figuring out which direction to start walking. Crystal's not a bad person, Derek said finally. I know that. She grew up with nothing. He turned the mug in his hands. Her dad left when she was 8. They moved 4 times before she graduated. Everything she has, she built from scratch. He looked at me. When she sees you with the house, with the workshop, with all of it, I think it makes her feel like she can't catch up. Like no matter what she achieves, she's still standing outside something she wasn't born into. I listened to this without speaking. That's not an excuse, he said. I'm not making it one. What she said was wrong. She knows it. He set down the mug. She's been wanting to apologize, but she's proud, Dad. Proud in a way that's also scared. She can take her time, I said. Derek looked at me. You're still selling the house. I am. He nodded slowly, like he'd known that already and was just confirming it. It's your property. You've always been clear about that. It was never about the property. I know. He met my eyes. I know what it was about. I waited too long to say something to her. I kept thinking she'd soften on her own. Some things don't soften on their own, I said. You have to apply heat. He almost smiled at that. I want to help with a down payment, I said, on whatever you buy. I'm not putting you out on the street, but I want you to own something. I want it to be yours. Derek was quiet for a long time. Outside, the wind picked up and I heard the workshop's side door rattle in its frame. I was angry with you for a long time, he said. When I was younger, you were always in the shop or on a job site. I'd come home from school and you'd already be in here. He looked at the walls. I thought it meant we mattered less than the work. The words landed on me the way I knew they would. Not as a surprise, exactly, but as a confirmation of something I'd carried without looking at directly. You weren't wrong, I said. I was better with joints than I was with conversations. Your mother was the one who made the house warm. When she got sick, I didn't know how to I stopped. I went further into the work because I didn't know what else to do. That wasn't fair to you. Derek looked at his hands. I should have said that a long time ago, I said. I'm saying it now. We sat with that for a while, 2 men in a workshop, the wood quiet around us, the morning light coming in through the skylights at a low angle. Noah told me you let him try the chisel, Derek said. He has good hands. He's been asking about it since. Derek looked up at me. Could he really come on Saturdays? I told him he could. Derek nodded. He'd love that. A pause. I would have loved that. When I was his age. Then come with him, I said. The look on his face wasn't easy to describe. Surprise, mostly. And under it, something that looked like relief. The apology from Crystal came 11 days later. Not a phone call and not a note. She came to the door on a Wednesday afternoon when I was not expecting anyone. She was in work clothes, jacket still on, like she'd come directly from the office and not given herself time to change or reconsider. She stood on my front step and said, without preamble and without drama, what I said at dinner was wrong. And the other things, over the years, I was wrong. I looked at her. Her chin was up, but her eyes were tired. I don't expect you to unsell the house, she said. I needed to say it. Thank you, I said. I mean that. She nodded once and turned to go. Crystal, I said. She stopped. Noah told me you worked 3 jobs the year you started college. I'd heard this from Derek years ago. Cleaned offices in the morning, cashier evenings, something else on weekends. She turned back slightly. I respect that, I said. I always have. I should have told you that. She didn't say anything. But her chin came down an inch, and she looked at me differently. The gallery in Nashville called the last week of October. A client had seen a photograph of the console table, the cherry one, and wanted to know the asking price. I told the gallery owner, and there was a brief silence on the line. That's below what I'd recommend, she said. This client collects seriously. I'd go higher. We settled on a number that I won't put here, only to say it was more than I'd expected, and that when I got off the phone I walked to the workshop and stood in the middle of it and looked at the empty horses where the table had been, and I thought about Crystal saying he putters around in his workshop, and I thought about Derek telling me I was always somewhere else, and I thought about Noah's hands on the chisel finding the feeling on the second pass. I thought about Carol, who would have made strong coffee and sat across from me and said something that got right to the middle of the thing without working around the outside of it first. I thought about the observatory that the narrator in the other story had dreamed of. I didn't have an observatory. What I had was this room, these tools, this specific silence. And it was enough. It had always been enough. I just hadn't always been able to say so. The first Saturday Noah came, Derek drove him. He walked him to the workshop door and then stood there a moment, hands in his jacket pockets. You want to come in? I asked. Derek looked past me at the workbench, the tools on the pegboard, the rocking chair in progress on the horses. Next time, he said. I just wanted to bring him today. Next time, I agreed. Noah was already inside, standing in front of the white oak chair, looking at the curve of the back rail. Grandpa, he said, how do you get the bend in this without it cracking? I showed him. We worked the whole morning, and the workshop was full of the sounds I know best. The plane, the mallet, the steady shush of sandpaper finding its rhythm, and underneath it, low and constant, a kind of quiet that isn't empty, the kind that comes when things are where they belong. Outside, the October light fell across the skylights at an angle that turned everything warm and exact. Across the yard, the house where I'd raised my son stood with its windows catching the same light. Somewhere in a neighborhood across town, Derek and Crystal were beginning the slow work of finding something they could call their own. And here, in the workshop on Carver Road, my grandson held a hand plane for the first time and moved it along a piece of white oak and felt, somewhere in his palms, the grain of the wood pushing back. There, I said. That's it. He looked up at me with a face that was still figuring out what it knew. Yeah, he said. I feel it.